Good morning. It is actually just a moment past 9:30, so I'd like to get this meeting started. We do have a quorum with Mike sitting in as an alternate until Tino arrives. So we will go ahead and call this meeting to order and begin with introductions. Chief Urquidez, can we start with you?
Yes, Michael Urquidez, representing Monterey County Fire Service Advanced Life Support Provider.
Eric Welling, Monterey County Regional Fire.
Jim Langborg, City of Greenfield, representing Monterey County Fire BLS.
Gary Malay, Monterey County OAS.
Carla Spencer, Director of Emergency at Salinas Valley Memorial, representing Hospital Administration.
Harry Robbins represents Citizens Peninsula.
Mike Eslinger, representing the EOA provider.
Jody Schaefer, citizen.
Susan Pledge from County Council.
Mike Petrie, EMS Agency.
Elsa Jimenez, Health Department. Teresa Rios, EMS Agency.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, all right. Tristan Keesley, Local 2606.
Ethan, Local 2606.
Scott Gavion. I am a member of Local 2606, but I'm also a firefighter or a paramedic.
Let's get on.
Mike Moreland, District Vice President for the CAL FIRE Local 281. John Greathouse, Public Health.
Who's making EMR?
Josh Hofstadter, President of the Souls Firefighters Association.
Charlotte Allen, Carmel Highlands Fire Board. Liz Merritt, Carmel Highlands Fire.
Sam Malasteri.
Jim Rossi, Carmel Highlands Fire.
Warren Pete Poitras, Monterey County Regional Fire District 4.
Steve Brooks, EMS Agency.
Jared Bagwell, EMS Agency.
Laura Wallen, EMS Agency.
Stephanie Yeoman, EMS Agency. Andrea Orchard from Cypress Fire Protection.
Cheryl Getz, Fire Chief, Nico Fire.
Mike Nickham, Pebble Beach Community Services District.
Reno DeTulio, CAL FIRE.
Jess Mendoza, North County Fire.
George Nunez, CAL FIRE, and I'm an ALS Fire alternate.
Michelle Bonson, Fire.
Scott Houchins, Citizens Fire.
Leanne Magoski, Monterey County Director.
Sam Clement, Columbus Fire.
There we go. Thank you for your introductions. It looks like we have a few more coming in, and I'll introduce Dave Jednick, paramedic. And then, is that Tino behind him?
Yeah, Dave Jednick.
Okay. Pardon me? Josh, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Josh, the Supervisor of the Office.
Okay, very good. All right. Okay, so we're going to start this special meeting and open it up to public comment. Any member of the public may address the committee for a period not to exceed 3 minutes on any issue not on the committee's agenda. The EMCC will listen to all communications but may not take any action. Do I hear any public comment?
Lindsay Merritt, Carmel Highlands. I've been a resident in Carmel Highlands for almost 20 years, and I'm very fortunate. We have a very tight-knit community in the Highlands. We have 3 very active HOAs. During the Sobranos fire, it really came together. The community really came together, and we are the type of community that we know our neighbors. And that was really evident last year, year before, with the Rio Road construction project. When the community finally found out about what was going to be going on at Rio Road, our supervisor held a public meeting. County planning came to the meeting, and they heard from the public. And they were very responsive, and changes were made to Rio Road. And made it much better, especially for those who live south of Rio Road. So a public support, a public meeting is really important. And I think that's been one thing that's been lacking in this issue. It's been a complete surprise to many, certainly many in my community. They had no idea. And other people that I know in other parts of the county are also surprised when they start talking about it, because they have no idea what's been going on. Another issue that we seem to have or worked out was the two districts currently that their ambulance support would no longer be able to go out of district. And I know for the Highlands that's going to be very important. Could be a matter of life and death. In a fire, there's mutual aid. It seems that should be the same way with ambulances. The Highlands, originally, our fire paramedics, they have an 8-minute response time. If accordingly now, with the new RFP, it will be doubled to 60 minutes plus, because we will probably in the 10% overage where we don't have to meet the required time. I'm just wondering, is that 8 minutes plus worth the life or death of somebody? Thank you. Sir?
I'm Sam Ballester. I've been an EMT here over 40 years. Most of you know me. I spent 10 years on this council. I just want to remind everybody, Measure A of 2000, that there's a lot of provisions in here that aren't being adhered to for the paramedic training, EMT training, or equipment and things like that. I was on the committee that helped pass it when the state changed the law for the property tax. So I want to remind everybody, we need to follow what we passed.
Is there any other public comment? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Jim Rawson. I'm on the Highlands Fire Board. I've been studying a little bit, thinking about how I get emergency services. I first moved to California in Orange County. The gentleman beside me was an Orange County firefighter. Okay, we have a county fire department. I then moved to Los Angeles County and found that we have a Los Angeles County Fire Department. And there, it turns out that the fire people show up, and if you need a paramedic, they have a pickup truck that comes with a couple of paramedics, and then there is ambulance service that follows through with probably a county contract. My office was in the city of Los Angeles, and I remember that they had fire department, but the city of Los Angeles also had ambulance service. These people were not coordinated with the fire department. They were separate individuals who were not cross-trained as fire people. After I got on the fire board, my son changed professions and he became a paramedic. He is now a paramedic captain in San Ramon Valley. And I look at the way their department has been set up. Because of some unfortunate occurrences in the 40s, they made the determination that the fire department would be very good for providing ambulance service also. At present, I think they have 11 stations. Probably 5 of them have ambulances. All the people that are new hires are cross-trained as firefighter paramedics. I think that's a wonderful thing that we should be looking for in Monterey County. I had a meeting with Supervisor Dave Potter at the time, and I said, why isn't there a county fire department? And maybe sometime in my lifetime, we'll see some consolidation and coordination of that kind of service in Monterey County. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Yeah. Warren Poitras, Monterey County Regional Fire District. It seems to me, the reason I'm here is I'm very concerned as a member of the board of the Monterey County Regional Fire District and as a citizen. God knows I could have a heart attack today, and I want an ambulance there with a paramedic as fast as possible. And I don't want the county deciding this one can come and that one can't. I want the fastest, closest ambulance to respond to my or my wife or any citizen in this county. And the response times are being stretched to the point where they're endangering people's lives. Let's remember why we're here, and that's to protect the lives of everybody in this county. And it seems to me that goal is becoming lost in the mist somehow. We need to straighten that out. And if the closest ambulance can respond, then that ambulance ought to be able to respond. And there should be no rules precluding that or interfering with that in any way, particularly when the county contract provider has entered into an agreement and is perfectly fine with having another ambulance respond if they can't get there in time. Let's worry about the person whose life's in danger and not money. And whatever else the reason we're even here. Save lives, that's the most important thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I've received an email.
Oh, thank you.
We received an email from Margaret Robbins, who wanted to have her comments read into the record. I want a detailed analysis why the ambulance company needs to be changed. I have heard that it will take a new ambulance company longer to reach us. Is this true? Why was the notice of this meeting limited? Details, please. Please include my comments in the public record. I am extremely unhappy. Signed, Margaret Robbins. Thank you.
Teresa, does that indicate an address within the county?
Carmel?
Carmel?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I entertain any other public comment before we move on to?
I'd like to speak for
Yes.
Josh Hostetter, the Salinas firefighter. I wanted to come and address this forum this morning on behalf of our firefighters in our department, as well as other firefighters and paramedics in the county. In my opinion, in the last year, the EMS agency of Monterey County has acted pretty recklessly. They've compromised public trust throughout the county. Our paramedics have personally been through 3 investigations at the city level, county level, and state level. This has in turn kind of compromised the trust between the agencies that support this agency, being the EMS agency. As we move forward and look at this RFP, I think it's important that the stakeholders and the supporting agencies, like the fire departments, have a seat at the table, have a voice to be listened to, and that we start to work together with the Monterey County EMS agency to do what's best for the citizens and do what's best for the resources that are there to serve those citizens. What our paramedics have gone through, the amount of paramedics that we've lost due to some of the allegations that they had to sustain, it completely attacked their ability to provide for their families. It made things very hard to go into people's homes and sustain the community's trust. I think this panel has to take into consideration the seriousness of the community's trust, along with the trust of the local agencies and the fire departments. Thank you.
It looks like we've had more people walk in, so additional public comments?
Sure, I'll stand up. Policymaker, City of Salinas, very, very worried about the present contract that's being considered. I think it puts lives at risk. The fact that you would not have any sort of set time for response means that there are folks in rural Monterey County that could suffer. I think it also could limit and does limit the ability for our taxpayer-funded public safety professionals to do their job. So just ask that you be mindful and thoughtful as this moves along.
Sir, did we get your name?
Steve McShane, City Councilman, City of Salinas.
Thank you. Okay. Sir.
Mike Moreland, again, I represent the professional firefighters of CAL FIRE. I'm here to basically also, I concur with what Josh has said in this, and would like to see that this committee maybe pull this contract and take it back to a working group with law enforcement, the fire departments, the EMS agencies, and they can work on this together, cooperatively. They can work on this in solidarity and with unity, and come to a better contract that would not only assist the citizens of Monterey County, but also bring better response for our agency.
Additional public comment? We welcome all public comment. Hearing no more, we'll move on to old business. We will start with the only old business left over from last week's meeting, discussion and request for adoption of the 2018 EMS plan. And is that, Mike, are you going to speak to who's?
I can speak to it. It was provided in the packet. If anybody has any questions, I could answer those or discuss, and Laura can speak to some trauma numbers as well.
In validating the data, I'm sorry, I just want to cover this. In validating the data for the trauma numbers, what was put out in the draft was corrected. So I have the corrected numbers here, and I'd like to pass these around to the members of the committee.
So this is a correction to the EMS plan?
This is a correction to page 33 of the draft EMS plan. I don't know if I have copies for everybody. Here's some, sure, I got more than, I got you more. Okay, yeah, you guys, they're pretty numbers.
So I know that one of the reasons we delayed the conversation on the EMS plan was that it appeared there were committee members that had questions or comments about the plan. At this point, are there, do I hear any, is there a report you want to give other than the plan as corrected?
Yeah, it's just an update to the state that's provided every year. The only changes were just the current with the previous year's numbers and some minor updates to the state on projects we're working on, but it's largely just an update.
Okay.
Any specific significant changes?
The numbers are significant. The difference, and we just submitted to our last, these, we went from 980, we went from 2654 trauma patients down to 987.
That's what I was concerned about.
So on the way it's worded, the number one question is number of patients meeting trauma triage criteria. This includes step 1 through 4. So we have 2,868 of those. The number of major trauma victims transported directly to a trauma center by ambulance. Our definition policy defines major trauma victims as step 1 through 3. So it drops significantly. Most of our trauma patients are step 4. Number 3 also is major trauma victims, step 1 through 3. And question number 4 is step 1 through 4.
Okay, good. I'm happy with the change because we were scared, I think, with the first version we saw. So I think that point of correction, we appreciate the update.
Sure. Laura, and how does this compare? So I'm glad we went back and revisited our interpretation of the policy and the count. How did we report the data last year?
Using the same
The
methodology.
revised methodology?
Yes.
Okay.
No, the same methodology last year.
Okay.
And so, Laura, the 50 are patients that were transferred, that arrived at other local hospitals and then were had a trauma transfer. Is that correct?
Yes, most of them were transferred to Natividad, but there were a number that went to Stanford or to Valley, and this also includes Natividad. I believe they re-triaged 6 or 8 patients to a level 1 trauma center.
And to answer the question, the only changes were updates. There wasn't any major changes. At page 3, at the very top, it does summarize what was actually updated, and it was the summary tables. We added some plan progress objectives. That's part of the state requirements now on a couple of the requirements that we're still working on. And just updated tables.
So I guess the only question I had was when you go through the trauma plan, or not the system plan, all of them, all the tables that say meets standard, meets recommended guidelines, or does not currently meet standards, is it our goal to always meet recommended guidelines and we're in process, or what? how do I read the work to be done based on this?
The state has requirements, and those are required. Any requirements that we might be deficient in, we're supposed to enter in our objectives to correct that, which we did.
Yeah, I saw that.
The recommendations are not required, that they're kind of, we want you to have these, and we've indicated in there the ones that we meet and the ones that we do not meet at the time. And those are all listed, the beginning of agency with actual guidelines and requirements.
Steve, maybe in the future, we might want to categorize those by highlighting or something so they're more identifiable to people who read it.
Okay.
Oh, Jared, I'm sorry.
Yeah, page 21 indicates the two.
Okay.
Yeah, we could do that.
Any other committee members that, yeah, Tina?
Yeah, I'm looking at the resource directory, table 8, and I'm assuming this gets all sent to the state, right? And I see there's a lot of them that are incomplete, meaning there's no total responses for other providers or number of vehicles. Is that something that the state will accept, or can we put something in there like not provided by the agency?
Which table, Tina? Sorry.
Well, you're looking at all the resource directory, and there's several.
Page 36.
Yeah, you have several from 36 all the way to 50. You have some agencies that don't have.
Yeah, they only require data for transport. So.
Because there's some in here that says do not provide. I was wondering if the state will accept that and that.
Page 36.
So like if you go to 45, you'll see that CalSTAR data is presented. So like Jared said, it's only for those entities that actually, City of Carmel ambulance is recorded.
I still don't understand the question, I'm sorry.
No, there's several resource providers that don't have total number of responses.
Are they transport providers?
They're not transport, but you have some that note the total number of responses.
Yeah, those are not required. The only thing the state wants is the actual responses for transport agencies.
Okay.
It's kind of a standard, it's kind of a versatile form that you just, use for the fire district or transport provider. So you check the appropriate box.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I'm sure just.
I have a comment. City 911 Director, and I just had a chance to review this table 4, so I apologize for bringing it up now. But on page 31, table 4, it says number of secondary PSAPs, and it lists 1. I do believe we have 2 in the county, AMR being 1 and CAL FIRE being the second.
What did you say the first one was?
AMR is a secondary PSAP, and CAL FIRE is another secondary PSAP.
Secondary? Okay.
Yeah, meaning that they don't receive direct 911 calls from the public. They have to be transferred by another agency.
Right, I understand what PSAP is. I thought you admitted Carmel, so that's
No.
a primary. That's a primary.
They're primary.
Yeah.
Hey, Jared, on CalSTAR, I think we're going to have to change it from transporting agency to air ambulance services. There's on page 45.
Okay.
So with those corrections, any other comment on that plan itself from committee members?
Just one clarification on the number of, I guess, primary PSAPs. Is there a way, Jared, that we can actually list who those are? Not necessarily for this, but in the future, I know the state probably doesn't require it, just to educate us. I don't know.
Footnoted.
Yeah.
Who they are, or who's the secondary, or.
Yeah.
Because, we hear Carmel has their own dispatch, Palm Fire has their own dispatch, Hunter Liggett. I don't know if they're included. And just someone asked, I wouldn't be able to answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any public comment on the 2018 EMS plan? All right, seeing none, I think we are looking for a motion to adopt this plan before it moves on to the Board of Supervisors.
So moved with the changes that we've mentioned.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have adopted the 2018 EMS plan with corrections. Thanks. All right, now we're on to new business. We're going to start with the process for approval and implementation of the EMS communication policies, specifically 3010, 3030, and 3050. Mike,
So,
speak to.
could you give me some
Okay.
guidance on what is the intent of this agenda item?
So the history that I know is that there were concerns that we needed additional time to work through these policies. And my understanding was that not long after our meeting last week, you had made a decision to pull the policies and come up, and we need to know what the plan is to address the issues that created the policies to be pulled and how we're going to move forward before they're implemented. Does that help?
It does. So what our plan would be is that we will reestablish our working group. We will have 1 or 2 meetings to try to focus on the implementation of these policies as they're written, and try to work through those and then bring it back to Office and MAC again for approval.
Any discussion from committee members? I guess my question is, we would be looking for some sort of schedule or calendar so that we know what the timeline is. And I don't expect it today, but we would want to see it.
Well,
soon.
I think we would work to have it back to Ops and MAC by the May 8th meeting.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if we can make a doodle poll, but, we need to have the key players there. So we need to have a process where folks show their availability. There's some online programs that will help do that. Obviously the the 911 director needs to be present.
Right.
Dr. Stubblefield, medical director, remember, and I think we get lost on this. We have, whatever he says, we do. And we need his interpretation of what he believes medical control consists of during that policy. And so those are just the 2 things from the ALS fire-based providers that we want to make sure that those meetings have those folks to be there, along with representatives from law, the EOA provider, AMR, and fire.
Mike, along with that, the question I have is this reconvening the existing working group, or is it going to be a new working group? And if so, can we clearly identify who the players are and what disciplines they represent?
I think that's fine, and I think it can be open to anyone who wants to attend.
Well, to go with what Mike said.
And thank you, Mike, for pulling those items, because he came and spoke to county law chiefs and told us he would be pulling those for work group. So we appreciate that you're doing that. But law is just asking that whoever's on the work group, that it be organizations who have to implement these policies.
That's exactly.
And you can add other people, but at a minimum, that's what law is asking for.
And from law, that's going to be Carmel and CHP are the 2 primary.
Okay, so what you're saying, Mike, is it already identified?
Well, why don't we reset it right now so there's no misunderstanding of who's on it and who's not?
That's what I'm saying.
I think we need Jared Bagwell, you'll lead this, the Emergency Communications Department Director, a representative from CHP, a representative from City of Carmel. It sounds like POM is also a PSAP, so we want Presidio Monterey.
You're going for PSAPs? Don't forget state parks then.
Okay, state parks. Also, then who would fire like?
I think we'd probably take our existing, Jim, were you on that working group? I know Galvin's was. Also.
It's myself and Eric.
Oh, okay. I would say because of consistency, that way we don't have, is those 2 would be who we'd support.
And timing being an issue and wanting all players, I know that you cannot accommodate everybody's schedule, but how would you determine dates based on availability? Are we talking, there must be somebody from every discipline at the table, and if that's the case, are there backup representation, or, you know?
Yeah, I would say, first and foremost, Dr. Stubblefield. Right, and then we reverse engineer down that. But if he's not there, then we're not going to get anywhere because we need to validate his direction.
Okay.
I just want to echo the need for the physician to be there interacting with the people that actually do the job, because he may not realize some of the things that actually happen in the field. The other question I have is, I know we were on this timeline. I'm new to the group. I don't understand, is there a reason why we have to stay within this timeline? Or is there the ability to extend it to ensure that we have a good and proper product at the end of this?
I think we do have a timeline we want to stay on. As we know and as we've discussed at the last EMCC meeting, the status quo produces real tangible threats to public health and safety, and we're trying to get those fixed.
And I think just the May time frame, maybe an extension of a month or two to ensure that there are enough meetings for proper input and consideration in the process. You know, no, I'm not saying drag this out a year. I'm just, are we set on this May deadline, or is there some room in there so that we can make sure that we get the right people at the table?
I think, why don't we shoot for May, and if it's impossible to do, then I guess we can extend it. But it's important to understand that the status quo doesn't work, and we had a case with a very, very bad outcome that we talked about at the last EMCC meeting, and I'm really trying to avoid that. I'm trying to get the system fixed. So when someone calls, they can get the life-saving pre-arrival instructions that they're not getting now.
So at the contract compliance work group in April?
Yeah.
In April, our group identified, you know, we were looking at data related to the percentage of patients that got EMD, and it was somewhere in the range of 50%. And we recognize that it will never be 100% for all of the reasons that it won't. But as a group, the contract compliance group, who consists of the citizens and a physician representative, we made a motion in our group to make sure we brought to EMCC our absolute support of moving EMD forward in a fair and expeditious manner. We strongly support doing this, and quite honestly, when I look at all of the communication between all agencies, it appears that everybody supports it. We just need to get the details right, and I really look forward to transparency and cooperation with all members to make it happen.
To put this in context, this was a high priority issue with communications and with fire chiefs in 1995, and that has been dragging on since that in one form or another.
Sir.
Yeah, I'd like to ask that, since I know that every call currently goes to EMD, that whatever the details is provided to the working group, so that this doesn't happen again, so they can make sure that whatever they work on, you know, addresses the problem. So whatever the working group, if they could have a model of what happens, where the breakdown is, so that would be one of the things they try to fix on that.
Right, and that was when the MAC, Medical Advisory Subcommittee, formed the MPDS working group in July of 2018. That was the direction, that they go and implement, identify and correct the barriers to implementation of full MPDS in the system.
And I think, just for clarification, I think it would be important to establish a new group, because this scope and purpose is just a little bit different. They're similar, but the initial scope was just simply to identify the calls that were not being sent and get them sent. But this new discussion is, I think, a broader topic, so I think it should be established as a new work group, if that's what matters.
Well, I would think maybe part of the work group is to start by establishing the parameters of what you hope to achieve in this group, so that you all walk away feeling like you have hit those issues. You need a mission statement or whatever it is.
The goals and objectives should be clearly defined.
Very clearly defined. And I want to apologize, I said April meeting, I guess I'm looking forward to April. It was our February meeting. April can't come quick enough.
Let's talk about the next one.
That's a premonition.
Exactly. Yes.
Can I request that if you're going to really change the initial mission, if you choose to deal with any of the sort of triage away from facilities, nurse-based guidelines, those omega type of cases, we'd like hospital record information there.
Is that in the current scope?
That's part of medical priority dispatch, is to consider those patients that can be treated
It
in
is
alternate
covered in one of the
locations.
policies,
Yes.
long term.
So it was not necessarily ready for implementation at this point, but if we're going to change the focus and deal with the whole thing, we can give the hospital component support.
I would be concerned that if we're going through, that this work group initially needs to be dealing with what we can do now. And I don't know that the nurse, if that was part of what we could do now. I may be wrong.
I'm fine if they're going to put that off the table and leave that for a later date. It's just if it comes up and it's a consideration within this.
I think that is clearly where we're headed, but I think what we need to do right now is fix the potential harm, which is people not getting the pre-arrival instructions. So I think we'll get that, and then phase 2 will be something that we'll start taking on after probably August.
Can we write through a policy to reflect that those segments are not going to be activated at this point and we'll reconvene?
I think that's fine. We can memorialize that and have that as part of our understanding right now.
That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Madam Chair, I just had a question, maybe for Leanne. We're hearing 50% of current. Where are the rest going? I'm confused. I mean, Chief McGowan saying, hey, everything's kind of coming through the PSAP, going to, I think AMR now is the primary EMD. Where are we losing such a big percent, I guess? Is it the call taker improperly coding it?
No, it's not being improperly coded, but anything that does not have a medical component at this time is not being sent to the secondary PSAP. So when our dispatcher answers the phone, they have to confirm the address, and then they have to confirm what's going on. And then they create a call simultaneously for EMS and for fire at the same time so that we can get help started. And then it's triaged, or then it's sent to AMR for MPDS. So at this time, about 50% of those calls, I'm not intimate with the data obviously, but if there's a scene security issue, we're not transferring that call. If it's a third party or second party or caller that's no longer at the scene, we're not transferring that call. From time to time, there will be incidences where the information we have is only as good as our caller. So if the caller said, I need help with XYZ, and units arrive on scene and find out it's a medical, we don't know that. And so this is the way the system is currently set up. And so I think it's important to realize that when we look at the safety of response, the safety of our citizens, we want to get help there as soon as we possibly can. And that's what the 911 center is doing at this time.
Do you believe we're on the right path? If you're given leader's intent from Dr. Stubblefield, giving direction that you can achieve that as the primary PSAP? I mean, within reason, obviously 100%. I mean, what would be the pitfalls right now of once we approve policy 3000, get that implemented? We don't have the software?
We can't, sometimes there's staffing issues with AMR, and no disrespect to them, if we get 6 medical calls to transfer, there's typically only 3 to 4 people on duty, and they're dispatching the calls while they're transferring. So sometimes it can be that we will get a busy signal from them, so we will have to classify it as soon as we can. The important thing to realize is anytime anyone calls 911 in this county and we take that call, a call for service is being dispatched immediately. It's then being triaged. That's when we're getting the pre-arrival instructions. That's when it could be triaged back down to an omega, and I think that part of the system still can be flushed out. But we're never going to get 100% of the calls triaged through EMD.
Leanne, I have a question. Is that pretty much industry standard up and down California right now?
Anything with a scene security component is not going to be triaged by EMD. We are more concerned about scene safety than we are. Now, given that caveat, if it's true pre-arrival CPR, choking, things of that nature, they're going to do their best to get that transferred and stay on the line with that caller as long as scene safety is paramount.
Thank you. Jody?
Eric.
Having heard several people identify the critical role of the medical director in the development of policy, I'd like to ask the question, where is the medical director?
I can't answer that.
I think that's a question for the medical director.
I didn't hear the answer.
I said, I think that's a question for the medical director.
No, he's not here to answer.
No.
Is there any other public comment on item A, process for approval and implementation of EMS communication policies?
I think just the one thing that concerns, and it sounds like I think we got the right folks hopefully, that we need to get this executed quickly and for approved, is just, Leanne, remember I think the issue was, and you kind of hit on it, that resources will start down the road, and then information will come out, so we're not delaying. I think that was a concern of the fire service, was we were going to be held up, and Michael, I think you addressed that maybe last week. Are we clear that we now can understand that we can get the roles changing, and internally, if we want to reduce to code 2, that that's agency specific? It sounds like that can be accomplished.
Yes, I mean, we dispatch the call based on our standard, and at this time, the company officer in the field, that's their prerogative to escalate or de-escalate as they see fit.
Thank you.
So, Chief, and thank you for that. I think I should probably respond, is that I believe the EMS agency at this point, and based on the communication we've had with Chief Hansholzer, I think he's here, we basically, I think we're on just about the same page.
Yes.
Now, a new issue was brought up within the last, since the end of 2018, where there's a question as to whether the county dispatch center wants to provide MPDS, and there's a question as to whether other secondary PSAPs want to provide MPDS. That has never been brought up before the start of this year, when we've been working on these policies directly since last July, and indirectly about a year before that. And I think, being very candid, I think that's going to become a big sticking point for us. I think, if you talk about that the fire department has the discretion to respond whatever code they want, we've said great. We've said we're not going to not notify you about calls, and we never had planned on not notifying you. We are assuring, as we have from the beginning, that there should be no delay in the dispatch of an ambulance or a first responder. In fact, when it comes to the primary PSAP, that call taker takes the initial input information and it goes to the fire dispatcher and the ambulance call taker / dispatcher. So what we're trying to do right now is simply assure that as many people as possible are getting that pre-arrival instruction.
Yeah, and that brings a great point up, Michael, and maybe it's something that we develop a policy that if someone wants to transition into I guess the proper term is secondary PSAP and do their EMD, or they have to be primary?
Any PSAP can do EMD if it is approved and supported.
And I'm always about leaders' intent, so we can develop a policy just like a BLS fire provider that wants to go advanced life support. Dr. Stubblefield, under his medical license, saying you have to do these components. So if someone wants to transition into doing EMD, it could be City of Carmel, Presidio PD, Presidio Fire. Here are the steps to do that. Here's the standardized training. Here's the hold harmless, whatever those components are. That way, again, we have different governing agencies, and CAL FIRE has a beautiful command. ECC, if they so choose to do that, it's transparent with the steps they need to go through. And again, the medical director's given his intent of what needs to be accomplished in order to do that. I've heard from different legal opinions that you can't have an exclusive dispatch center, meaning that's not part of the health and safety code to dictate one, unlike an ambulance provider, Monterey County being an exclusive operating area for ground transport. They can't do that for dispatch. And so again, I agree with Michael. I don't think we're looking for people to kind of, but there's been talk of other agencies wanting to do this. We might have to learn that concurrently of a policy that as we transition, here is what they have to do in order to achieve that, to meet, again, Dr. Stubblefield's medical direction.
In addition, the law chiefs are asking that the PSAPs do EMD when the capacity is available. Public safety always being the number one. And we're supporting, fire chiefs that they should have that option if they can meet the standards, whatever the standards are.
Any other discussion on this item?
Just one thing on the comment that was brought up that sometimes you get a bunch of calls at once and it may overwhelm your ambulance provider's dispatch center. If you had another PSAP that had the EMD ability along with the MD, what's it called, medical NDPES or whatever it is, we all agree that that's a good thing. You might have a redundancy in the system that might make the system more better.
Sure, could you speak to that, please? Speak to call overflow.
Yeah, so that is always a concern. The data does not suggest that is a current or foreseeable issue. And we did have AMR put in place a urgent disconnect policy to address that if it were to happen. But based on the data that we're seeing, we don't believe that is going to be the case. Now, whether it's extreme weather events or something that I'm sure you see in huge surge, but on the day-to-day or even the expected surges, we're not seeing that.
In May, we asked the question at the contract compliance last month, whatever month that was.
That was February.
Whether it was personnel, and AMR simply needed to add personnel. And the answer we got, if I'm correct, was no, it was not a personnel issue. It was a policy, a system issue. And so that's why we were like, that's got to be fixable then. So maybe it's real estate, I don't know what it is, but we were concerned that it increased in number. And as quick as possible.
And I would say we would look to meet whatever a national benchmark is set as what percentage of calls are EMD'd.
Right.
I mean, we should be no different than anybody else. Okay. Item A. Any other conversation on item A before we move on to item B? All right. Just want to begin item B, and this also goes for item C. These are rollover agenda items from requests made in January that didn't get on the March agenda for many good reasons. I got clarification. There was conversation. I was involved in the conversation. Chief Urquidez was involved in the conversation, and whoever the third person is in here. Anyway, after listening to the January minutes closely, we know that item C was definitely a request, and item B was somewhere in there as well. So we're going to start with role of medical control in implementation of EMS policies. And I can appreciate that you could probably go to a 2-day seminar on this topic. So I think it's important that we get to what is most germane here. And do you want to start the conversation, Mike?
I don't know what the
Yeah, I think that's the Chief Ewelling's part, is really we wanted to kind of hear from Dr. Stubblefield of kind of, if he was going to teach a class on Medical Director 101 to the layperson, what is his interpretation of 1798 under the Health and Safety Code? we've done some research, and I think we found a component I think is a great tool under that health and safety code. And really what it allows is, in the event if the stakeholders, meaning in this case the base station hospitals, if there's a policy that they believe maybe is not clear on their need as a receiving hospital, that they could ask Dr. Stubblefield to convene base hospital physicians and sit down almost like a mediation. And it's not should, it's shall. And it allows them the opportunity to kind of, us as first responders, there's not that process, but the base station receiving facilities could convene. So for us, remember we were talking about conflict resolution. I think that should be the process where we should identify. Hopefully our hospitals would say, hey, we have a concern about this. We want Dr. Stubblefield to execute section C of 1798, and let's convene this working group with those doctors and let them kind of whittle it out. And then, it's a great process without having to get a contentious work environment. And I didn't even know that was there, but I wanted to kind of get Dr. Stubblefield's kind of take on, you can see there was a lot of unhappy people at many of these meetings, but that was an eye-opener for me when I read that section, saying there is really a process. And somehow if we can make that more transparent to the stakeholders and maybe execute that or utilize that component a little bit more often, we as first responders would be very thankful for that. No one's looking for more meetings, so I think the quicker we can get to that kind of mediation process, and hey, at the end, how they ruled, but it's been validated through other physicians. For me, I was thinking, why is that in the health and safety code? And I guess there has to be a check and balance when we continue to say the medical director is the all. What he or she says is final word. Well, this subsection C is the check and balance of that, right? If we have a medical director who came from somewhere in the Midwest and they were able to do some amazing protocols and they come here and they want to implement that, well, then we wouldn't have a voice. There's that check and balance. So I just throw that out there somehow that I don't even know if that's still current, that part of the health and safety code, right? So that's why we wanted kind of Dr. Stubblefield to try to address when we can't come to an agreement.
So I'm hearing that this would come back as old business at the next meeting with a report from Dr. Stubblefield on a process to implement this particular.
And even if County Council, Susan, if you could see, maybe this was changed, there could have been an amendment. I mean, we don't know, right? I mean, we're not legislating. We know there's 161 bills in the legislature right now for first reading. Next week, could this be something else? So, we're not experts, but the more we can utilize a tool where those physicians can get in and be in agreement, we have a great check and balance.
Is there any public comment or professional comment? Okay. So it looks like we'll be bringing this back for old business. In May. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Item C, this is what we're pretty sure we meant to ask for in January, is a request from the EMS agency on a plan and process to define and share outcome data.
Why don't I take this?
Okay.
I think this will be a little bit easier than some of the other issues, thankfully. So I'm looking for my notes. So first of all, I just want to state it's the EMS agency's goal to have maximum transparency with the system as far as data goes. That while zealously protecting patient privacy and confidentiality, we want to make sure outcome data and output performance data, for example, intubation success rates, things like that, are available to other EMS system stakeholders and, to the extent legal, publicly available, because it's a way of informing the public about the quality of the EMS system. It's also a way, I think, as most people in this room know, of allowing medical practitioners to adjust their practice based on outcome information. So on January 24th, the Health Department, the EMS agency, met with the executive and medical leadership of CHOMP, of SVMH, and of Natividad. That meeting also included the program leadership of the stroke, STEMI, and trauma programs. As an output of that meeting, the EMS agency is working on trying to achieve data sharing on two fronts. One is technological, the other is policy-based. On the technological front, Fred Claridge is leading our effort. We have had meetings with Health IT, our Information Technology Health Department, Central Coast Health Connect, which is the local health information exchange, and with ESO, which is the Electronic Patient Care Record System. So technologically, we're trying to identify what is the best way to connect all of these disparate organizations together. Okay. At the same time, the policy-based output of that meeting was that Laura Wallen was going to survey all the EMS agencies across the state, 33 of them, to identify what data are they sharing, what data are they not sharing. And frankly, if we want to speak very candidly, this relates to trauma data. Okay, and there's a long history on this that predates me, so I don't know all the nuances on it. But Laura has received, as of yesterday, correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, 10 EMS agencies of 33 have responded. So what we're going to do is identify what data elements are being shared by which agencies. We're going to sit down with this group of medical and hospital executive leadership and see if we can reach some agreement. And we're, in fact, trying to mediate between some of the hospitals that don't see eye to eye on this issue. Once we get agreement there, then we want to go to the MAC and the EMCC with it. So everyone gets their input and has a chance to bless it. So that's where we are. That's how we see the process moving forward. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions from committee or public?
So we now have a countywide data system with ESO, all electronic data. Okay. And so data is more readily available right now than ever.
That is correct, yes.
So this is a really good step moving forward, and it's appreciated. And how many data analysts are employed under you?
The EMS agency currently has 0.5 FTE of an epidemiologist, which would be similar to a data analyst. Half-time, one half-time.
Okay. All right. So it's just a misunderstanding on my part that the folks that I deal with as a provider, their title is data analyst.
Okay.
So.
In the public health world, we use epidemiologists.
All right.
So, Mike, with all of that background information, what is your educated projection date of when we might see something?
One of the things I've learned on IT, I never guess. Two things is when someone says we have a great product coming out that is going to fix the interface problem, I don't believe it, and I can't make a legitimate prediction. It's really high on our priority list, though, because of the value not only to field providers, hospitals, but also to public health. Because it's going to allow us to change the way things work. So I would legitimately hope that certainly by the end of this calendar year, we have a fully functioning, fully integrated EMS data system in this county.
Have we looked out to other states to see what they're doing? And
We've looked at other states, we've looked at other local EMS agencies. I mean, right now on the technological side, it really is simply, do we go with a ESO-based data exchange to the hospitals, or do we connect to the intermediary health information exchange that they're already on? And that's sort of the technological issue. I think the policy issue is the bigger issue.
Yes. Technologically, it's easier to do. It's the policy issue, making sure we have the appropriate agreements in place for privacy, et cetera. To give you an idea, for whole person care, which is a state-funded pilot project to focus on high utilizers of all systems, fire, police, emergency department, jail, it took us almost 2 years to get a data sharing agreement in place with Central California Alliance for Health, which is the managed Medi-Cal plan. And it took us probably another 8 months to set up something with our own sheriff to be able to share some data. So I'm more optimistic that going forward it's going to be, the time is going to be a lot shorter, because I think people are starting to recognize that in order to improve the population's health, we have to have information from time of entry into the system to time of exit into the system, whether, in this world. And then from a improving health outcome perspective, we need to know, as somebody who's managing an individual or a population, all the points that they're touching. Are they in jail? Are they on social services? Are they connected to probation? So I think our community is more ripe and open now to data sharing, because they see that this is really the direction we need to move in to improve the health of our community. I think we all have that common core value in terms of trying to, the health rankings for California just came out, and we're at 21 out of all of the California counties. We were at 23, 24 in years prior, so we're moving in the right direction, and data sharing is going to be critical in terms of all of us who touch people to be able to help those individuals improve their health outcomes. So I think by the end of the calendar year, hopefully we'll have kind of a plan in place. It's just a matter of making sure that all the policy makers are in agreement, and then it's just developing the vehicle for getting us there.
I think from a policy perspective, I hate when people say, well, back in this place, but I just share something with you. I came from Oregon. 2 years ago, Oregon at the state level rolled out a data collection plan. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. They got a deal with Image Trend, and then the state health division built out a system with the data points that they wanted, and then rolled it out to the counties and the individual agencies. So any fire or EMS agency in Oregon is provided Image Trend software with that pre-built-in thing in there. And I guess what I'm saying is that it came from the state level from a policy perspective and then rolled down. So I would throw back to you at the county level, when you work with your state counterparts, if you can encourage them at the state level to agree upon something, then bring it down. I think it makes it easier.
And I completely agree with you. That's something that EMSAC, the EMS Administrator Association of California, tried to do for years and years. Because we think having commonality allows for much better data comparison. What we have in California is using the National EMS Information Standards, NEMSIS standards. There should be interconnectivity among the systems. I wish the state would have said, we're going to go to bid and do one thing statewide. What we tried to do in this county, going back about 2 years, we brought all the stakeholder organizations together, invited hospitals, dispatch centers, fire departments, ambulance providers, and said, what data system do you guys want? And then we stepped up and paid for it.
And this is more than just, I'm talking more at the policy level rather than the mechanics of the actual software.
Oregon is much more progressive than California.
And it's smaller too.
Sure.
And I realize it's not apples to apples. I'm just saying that from my perspective, if you can encourage that at a higher level, I think it makes it easier for the end user.
In California, it was a battle to get the state to actually require electronic data. So based on what we have, we're trying to move forward as best we can here.
And when we created this strategic plan last fall,
Yeah.
the two top priorities were EMD and data collection and data sharing. So, I mean, we're all on the same page going what we want, so. Any other conversation on data?
Jody?
Yes.
In between the Health Department Director and Michael and the Chief, I think you've touched upon all the comments I was going to make. I just wanted to add that at a meeting yesterday up in the Bay Area, there were some figures cited regarding data collection and propagation from the LEMSA up to the state EMS agency. And last year, 3.7 million PCRs went into the system, and there was no output. There was no output of usable data. One other thing, got a laugh from the crowd. Over 400 primary field impressions were identified. It's just not a usable number. And one of them was an orca bite. So obviously, we have a system that is well-intentioned. It's part of evidence-based medicine. Those are things that we're all in support of. It goes in line with EMD. But if we don't have that link between what is happening at the local level up with the policy direction at the state level, none of this is going to mean a thing.
And what meeting was that yesterday?
That was the Cal Chiefs, Northern California EMS Chiefs meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. You ready to move on? Okay. I'm just going to take the lead on this. I requested this agenda item after some of the confusion about what future agenda items would look like. So I am going to make a motion to request that we create a standing agenda item on the EMCC that specifically asks any committee member to submit an agenda item for future meetings. And that is my motion.
I would second that.
Okay. Any conversation about that? Public or committee member?
Policies and the guidelines is to be worked out by chair and EMS director, or how would we do that?
I believe that
It's in the bylaws.
it's in the bylaws.
It's in the bylaws? Okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
this is fine. I mean, this makes total sense.
Yeah, all right.
I just, if we have that as a specific item, we won't miss it. So,
Should I add?
sure.
Here, it's funny, the ICD-10 codes that hospitals use, 87,000 of them. And the thing is, with a good epidemiologist, what we can do is help providers by aggregating those together into usable numbers.
Yes.
So,
Okay, so we have a motion that was seconded. No other communication about it that I can hear. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Okay. We are down to item E, and this item came up as a result of the public comment made in March by Dr. Rosen regarding it's discussion and recommendation on dispatch of closest ambulance to medical emergencies within Monterey County POA as it relates to the current RFP for ambulance services within Monterey County.
Quick clarification, is it the current RFP specifically? And not
We are
the
talking
current
about the
contract?
one, not the current contract, the
Good,
current
okay,
RFP.
I want to make sure of that. That's
So,
understood.
Madam Chair, maybe Susan, when I saw this agenda item, I was completely floored, to be honest with you. We've been instructed and told time and time again that the current RFP and the components in it that we're not able to discuss with EMS staff.
And that's true.
We've now taken one bite of the apple when there's 105 questions and answers, 105 pages that came out this week out of a 225-page RFP. So my concern is that if we're going to talk about one bite of the apple, we want to go down to all the concerns that were raised.
So I want to be clear for the record, because we want to protect the integrity of the RFP process, and because a bidders conference has already occurred, where potential bidders had the opportunity to ask questions,
I am advising staff that they are not to comment or answer questions on the RFP. The RFP is a public document, however, and if this body wants to discuss that, they can. But staff will not be answering questions or commenting or discussing, so it would be just the EMCC.
So
This is a committee discussion.
back to my point, I don't feel comfortable, right, having this discussion, because I think we want to keep the integrity of the current process. I mean, we were told at the pre-bidders that, very clear. But I do want to point out from the Fire Chiefs Association, and I'm unfortunate Supervisor Lopez left already, we are going to request that this RFP, I might as well make sure I say it verbatim, be stopped until a working committee consisting of citizens, fire service, communications, and other relevant stakeholders can provide input into the process. Because there has been no apparent recognized external feedback, and we are concerned about the following things, and we go into a number of things that, again, that we're concerned about. As a EMCC appointed by the Board of Supervisors, we had listening sessions. And it was great by EMS staff to get those, I think, in probably each supervisor in the district. It was called EM System Redesign Listening. It did not mention one thing about an ambulance or request for proposal or about any other things such as item, closest ambulance, and everything else. And now we're starting to hear from the community they're not happy about that. And so there's no other way to meet the intent of what Susan has eloquently discussed of keeping the integrity of this RFP. We have no other choice but to either stop, bring it back through a stakeholder process, and then reconvene and get everybody's comments. 105 pages of questions and answers on a 225 RFP. If this doesn't send a message that people aren't clear or what happened, I don't know what happened. So that is our official stance, and we will be very honest that we're going to do everything in our powers that the hope of the supervisors and the community will support that. We'd rather stop it now, reset the clock, get leaders' intent from the Board of Supervisors of the do's and don'ts, and move forward. So I would make that as a motion to stop the current RFP process, and move it to the Board of Supervisors for convening either another consulting group just to come in and be a facilitator. Re-educate those community meetings. We got to advertise them of what the intent was, not EMS system redesign. An ambulance RFP input, listening sessions. They can continue with the listening. But for the Dr. Rosens and for the Director Poitras, that's their opportunity to give their intent of their community. And I truly believe we as stakeholders, and I want to bring a point up, Harold Baldemont was here when WestMed failed. He was on EMCC, he was appointed to a working group. Back then, Susan, you probably were there. They were told by county council that we could not use BLS ambulances in the Monterey County system because of CSA 74. That ballot language is clear on paramedic service and support. That's what they were told. Now there's potential we have BLS ambulance. So that's an example of let's have the community input. Maybe BLS today is a thing and we can agree on special events or other components. But that's our frustration now. And we're not going to bend, we're not going to cherry pick agenda and talk about it and then next week or next month, and not going to do that. It's all or none.
Okay.
Thank you.
Clarification on the motion, because he made a motion that we stop it. We don't have the power to stop the RFP. Make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah.
Advising them if they would support our recommendation.
If I can just add a little bit to that from a South County perspective, I did see that memo in the board packet. Went back, I talked to some of our firefighters, other local chiefs, city staff, and community stakeholders, and it's really easy to go back and hindsight is 20/20. But the feeling that I did walk away from that was it was not well advertised and understood, And then from my perspective, being the new person coming in, I would like to see from the input that was given what was gathered and how that was included in consideration in the process. You know, it's one thing to get feedback, it's another thing to add it. And I think that I would also add to the recommendation with the motion that we need to formally, in writing, need to make the recommendation to, and I went back and looked at the bylaws, that we are an advisory committee to both the EMCC or the director as well as the Board of Supervisors, that we, in writing formally, request that we suspend the RFP process until we can get a better stakeholder feedback, and I guess that's it. Thank you.
So, police law for the county is actually now talking with the community and stuff in this, and we're also recommending that the RFP process we recommend that the RFP process be stopped, and for the same reasons that the chief mentioned. One of our big concerns, though, is about closest available ambulance service from a law standpoint, so that's a huge concern. And the other one is that making sure that we have...
I want to be clear on this agenda before you start talking about things, that this is agendized to talk about closest ambulance only.
Okay, so we have concerns, so county law enforcement is asking that we make the recommendation the RFP process be stopped until a working committee is made up of consistent citizens, fire service, communications, and other relevant stakeholders to provide input into the process, and really kind of what the chief said. So,
based on what Susan just said, I have some concerns. I did finally get to read the tome over the weekend, and I have some concerns that could possibly be answered by the person who wrote, or the organization that wrote this. But as Susan said, we cannot address those concerns right now. I'll just say from a citizen standpoint, I have concerns over a wide variety of spectrum, and let it go at that.
So, and I'm going to go back to the actual agenda item, and I think we need to stay within the parameters of the agenda item for any recommendation or motion.
You have a motion on the floor, though.
It exceeded this.
Susan, do your magic. You know what the intent is.
Yeah.
I think Chief Katie's, if I may paraphrase you, is requesting that this group send an advisory letter to the Board of Supervisors recommending that the RFP be stopped or halted, the RFP process be halted, given concerns on dispatching of closest ambulance.
That's...
I don't want to,
Yeah.
it's your motion, Chief.
Yeah, but you know what the intent is, really just there's more than that, but if that's what we have to stay with the legal parameters, and add that component with many others. So,
point of order here. Can't this be considered an emergency situation? And my understanding of the Brown Act requirements is that if there's a 4/5 vote of the committee, that they can consider it an emergency and vote on it. And I would say the emergency reason is the timing of the system right now. And I don't really believe it's legal counsel's option to decide whether it's an emergency or not. It's this body's option to decide whether it's an emergency or not. So 4/5 of this group wants to do it as an emergency, they should be able to pass it. And they should be able to change the agenda so that you can get input on the RFP, which is why everybody's here in the room.
I would suggest in advising this body that there's a very specific requirements to declare an emergency under the Brown Act. I do not believe that those requirements are met. We could read the bylaws on urgency action. I think certainly that this body...
And with all due respect, that's your advice to this body.
It is.
The body stood aside.
So Susan, I would like to know what constitutes an emergency verbatim, not based on your opinion. Yeah.
There's two different things. There's an emergency
'cause I can Google
And
it too
there's
at
an
the same time.
urgency action. I don't believe that you qualify for either. I think you would be violating adding something at this time
I-
that's
I'd
not on
just
the
like to know
agenda
why it
would
doesn't
be a
qualify.
violation of the Brown Act.
I'd like to know why it doesn't qualify. What are the parameters of emergency?
I
would, as a, I think, Susan, to make your job easier, and we stay within the parameters, and we get the, I think we can get the intent, right? to the
You and I are on the
supervisors.
same page
Right.
here. If we start with the agenda.
We can get with that agenda, put that at least as a placeholder to the Board of Supervisors, saying, please, we're asking, please, this is just one component, but there's many others. I would still advance that motion forward to stay within the parameters, and
Can we stay within the parameters, and then we can have we will have a request for future agenda items?
Yes,
That's going to happen next month that could expand.
yes, thank you.
I'll concede on my request right for now, then.
So is there a motion with the committee based on
So the motion is,
public comment? Oh, I'm sorry, sorry.
I just want to remind, people's lives are at stake, so why can't it be considered an emergency if ambulance times are going to be doubled? To me, in the field, that constitutes an emergency.
Public comment also, if I may. I was at that public meeting, and I was the first speaker. Mary Adams, I don't think had taken office yet, but she was present. And at that time, I started my comments by saying, I feel very fortunate to live in Carmel Highlands. We have excellent ambulance service. We get 1 or 3 ambulances, the one that's the closest and fastest. Carmel City, Carmel Valley, which is Carmel Regional, I believe, or Monterey Regional, or the contracted AMR ambulance, which I normally see sitting at Del Monte Center on Monmouth or such. I came here to this meeting last time and said, now, to all my constituents in Carmel Highlands, I'm a liar, because the RFP totally wipes that out, and that is on this agenda. And I think you need to hear this loud and clear, to come up with an RFP that prohibits the city of Carmel ambulance from responding to my neighborhood. This gentleman right here, as a paramedic, came to my neighborhood to pick up a 94-year-old man with a broken hip. Carmel Highlands was unable to respond. Cypress engine responded with 2 paramedics. 2 more paramedics came from Carmel City. And unfortunately, they had to sit in the traffic jam for an hour and a half with this man with an IV waiting to get to the hospital. So I think this is very important that this not be part of the RFP. Thank you.
I went to public school, so bear with me a little bit. But this, what seems to be going on here, kind of seems to be like a 4th grade project. The county staff can't come in and comment. They don't want to play along with the group. And so when you have a group project and you choose not to play along, there gets to be issues. I think that the panel, I think the public has spoken here, there's some serious issues with this RFP. And I think you never have to make time to do things right the first time, but you always have to make time to do them right the second time. If it takes a little bit more time and it pushes back the RFP, and we need to extend the current contract, then so be it. I'm in support of that. But bear with me, I don't understand what's going on here. I'm with Blaine Public Schools.
If I can add my 2 cents, I just say, let's not lose sight of what we're here for, and that is to protect the public and provide service to them as rapidly as possible wherever that happens to be in the county. That's being lost here, I think. I'm worried about it, and I know my constituents are worried about it. So perhaps we ought to listen to the chief over there and do what's appropriate. Thank you.
We're digressing from the 4 to 6 minute response time that we try to meet in 80% of the county by doing stuff like this, and it doesn't make sense at all.
Again, I stand in support of this also, as Cop Fire Local 281. Our members are the ones who serve these gentlemen over here and citizens of their areas. And so we need to and go back and look at this.
I want to just voice my support for the motion on the floor to revisit this whole process. We've heard from the beginning that absolutely no public input, conflict of interest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I invite everybody to go to the Solano County EMS website. On that website, they are going through the process as well. And on that website, you will find their draft RFP, and then a second document that's the draft RFP in the track changes word mode of an RFP for an ambulance contract that's going to start in May of 2020. So they're only a few months behind us. And it's interesting that Solano County, who has to also answer to the state EMS authority, can have a lot of public input, vet their RFP in a public forum, and we have to do everything behind closed doors and can't talk about it. I think that there are other options on the table, and I think this is a great opportunity to reset and go back to a public, transparent, open process to get our RFP written in a way where we know that everybody's had an opportunity to say what they believe and design a system that's best for our community.
I would just say that, you know, I've been involved in several RFPs in this county on many levels, one of them being an ambulance RFP, and this just baffles me to this day that we are going down this road. And I appreciate your comments from the other side of the table there. I support fully holding up this process until we've had our input.
And I'd just like to reiterate that having public meetings can make a difference, and they need to be public meetings. This involves every citizen that lives in the county. They need to hear what's going on, what is being proposed, what can they do, their suggestions, their comments.
Any other public comment? Back to the committee, the motion.
Before the vote, just a comment that we've been here on lots of RFPs for this county. We've been here before the RFP process, during the RFP process, and now at the 11th hour on the next RFP, finally people are listening and going, we should have input. We'll see if it works. I know we've tried.
Okay. So, can you tell me your motion? Is it
I
what
think Susan
Susan
is back
said?
up.
What Susan said?
I can't make a motion.
It is to be, I think it was item agenda number 4, is the closest ambulance would be to ask the Board of Supervisors to halt the current RFP process and allow stakeholder input, meaning the community, the private, the community, communications centers, the hospitals, fire, law enforcement partners,
And any other relevant stakeholders.
and any other stakeholders. And that's, you know, I don't want to add any more. It's just the public's the most important.
Is there a second?
I second it.
I second it also, but like to add, recommend an extension on the current contract to ensure a proper process.
That's not on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda. But we can create that for an agenda item for next meeting. Okay, so we have a motion. Can somebody read the motion to me so we know what we're voting on?
Jody. The motion is section.
I think it's for clarification for everybody.
We can
When
get it
see
off
this
the
in
video as
writing.
well. So we're on new business, item E, the discussion recommendation on dispatch of closest ambulance to medical emergencies. On that item, the motion is that we stop the current RFP process. RFP 10671 asks the Board of Supervisors that they stop the process and allow stakeholder input, which includes the community, law enforcement, communications, fire, any other stakeholders that have been identified by county staff and the supervisors.
Related to closest ambulance? Related to the closest ambulance
Yes.
issue?
Yes.
Okay, as written on
Yes.
the agenda item? Okay, so you made a motion, Chief has seconded it, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
We abstain for now.
And I just want to, for the record, and hopefully the video, Elsa, you're the director, and we appreciate your support. I think you know what the intent is, right? I know we're trying to stay within the parameters of the Brown Act and agenda items, but you can sense there's more than just item D that's before us today. And so I was at a NorCal EMS meeting yesterday. Everything that has been predicted in these RFP processes are coming to light. Shortage of paramedics. We heard a system yesterday that started, and they're struggling already. We, as stakeholders, know this is a financial, the payer mix is very, we're concerned. We don't want another Westmed that couldn't make payroll after 6 months being here. What we would ask is that the county leadership can be very clear of your expectations of the system. And you lead by example. If you tell us there's no bells and whistles, then that means there's no bells and whistles for the county as well. We're seeing excessive fines. This is amazing document that this can generate almost 100 to 200,000.
Chief, you're
Yes.
Let's
So
talk about that.
Yeah.
You know my point, Elsa,
So-
right? I don't want this to be sugar-coated to the Board of Supervisors that my motion was one component. There's 105 pages. Thank you.
Shall we add an agenda item
I
to
think we're going
address
to, that would be my
the
request.
105 pages? I think we should, for May.
Yes.
Is add that agenda item to address the 105 pages that Chief
Address the
Ortiz is talking
concerns
about.
of the 105 pages.
Yeah.
The rest of the concerns. That way then we can
Thank you.
Yeah.
maybe.
So let's go to, so 5 is announcements, but I'm going to put in 4F, or I don't know what number it's going to be, but are there any other agenda items that the committee would like to request for the May 8th meeting?
I do want to say thank you for Supervisor Phillips. Thanks, Josh, for being here. I would really encourage all supervisors and their staff, chiefs of staff, that I think this is important to hear the discussion. That way, they know what we're trying to accomplish, and really, we don't want conflict. Really, we want to get back to the days of it's not stressful to come to this meeting. Poor Susan can, we don't have to do Brown Act 101 meetings. It's let's get back to what Director Poitras says, and we're here to serve the people. And if we can do that sooner than later, then I think we'd all be in a better place. Thank you.
Jody, what I'd like to see is a mechanism, a motion, or whatever have you, we can address our concerns.
Okay.
My concerns specifically deal with areas that I'm dealing with a map that show different changes in colors that can affect specific areas vis-a-vis the current contract. So we need that mechanism. Several suggestions have been made, but I'd like to get, we may have to bring our lunch for that one, and possibly dinner as well.
Yeah. I was thinking that.
Yeah, but this is really the first opportunity, other than inputs that we had as an organization and the public as a whole, to look at the RFP and see if there are any holes or controversial points in it. And I agree with the chief. We should not be coming to this point to find that. Maybe I've not said that properly, but there are concerns out there. They're not limited to those around the table. Obviously, the citizens that I represent have concerns, and I would suspect we've only heard from something less than about 5%. So we need to have that mechanism before we go forward.
We do have that mechanism. Can I ask Harry? I'm concerned about lunch, dinner, and maybe
Yeah,
a
I am.
weekend retreat or something. So how do we categorize and contains not the right word, but get it to, how do we make the salient points brought up without going line by line through every page that you,
Well, that's the thing that concerns me. This could turn into a marathon session. And organizationally, I'd like to have things clear, concise, and a specific time frame that we can get things done. Otherwise, you have people lose attention and whatever have you. So I don't have that answer. I don't have that answer. We could limit to, say, 3 items at this particular point in time, which we feel that are the most important. Obviously the issue with respect to the nearest ambulance is one. I would say that the coverage changes. As I went through the map, I keep circling things and saying, well, why does that change? What have you? That's probably another, and there's probably a third that we can come up. We could argue over priorities, but I think we need to have that input. And I don't like to see the process stopped, but the RFP process stopped. But in the same token, the eventual contract has got to be responsive to the needs of the people of this county, period.
So let me, because I think you gave me some parameters, can we, as a committee, commit to, I'm going to go to 5, but limit the discussion to no more than 10 minutes per item for the agenda for next, and then make a motion to communicate with the Board of Supervisors on those 5 items with additional information that these were our priorities, but obviously there could be more concerns.
What I would do is exactly that. I'd put a piece of butcher paper and do like think groups do and say, hey, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3. Get them on the table and say, I agree on the top 5 and go with that.
Okay.
And keep it at that.
Maybe just, maybe Susan can answer. I guess what we're concerned about too is we can't talk to staff about that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
I appreciate that.
if we want to propose solutions, because again, we can't come with problems. I believe we have solutions, but that's why, unfortunately, it's almost by design. I think Mike Durr said it the best at the Pre-Bidders Conference, because we asked about changing the RFP. He said there's 2 things the Board of Supervisors are going to be able to do. Either approve it as is, or not approve it. There was nothing in between, and now we're trying to get in between. So that's why the direction has to be clear. If we start over, I think it's going to be faster than going down to 105 pages.
I just want to say a point of clarification. It's not the Board of Supervisors approving the RFP, but approving whoever the review committee recommends as the recipient of the RFP.
And Nelson, that's a great point. I think that even lays more credibility as we're, stakeholders.
I'm going to caution this committee. We're starting to have substantive conversations which weren't agendized. We are setting the agenda for next meeting, and I think we need to stick with that.
So as setting the agenda for up to 5 items for discussion, the 5 most pressing concerns.
I guess
can
the
come up with
concern
some
is
language.
maybe Susan could, but I guess we just want to make sure that next meeting will be set, but county staff won't be able to comment, correct? So it won't be a two-way conversation.
It won't be a two-way conversation. It'll be, these are our concerns, and for this reason, what the agenda item is saying, we believe the RFP should be pulled, is where we're going.
Thank you.
Can I confirm the date for that meeting?
Sure, May 8th.
May 8th, I believe.
May 8th.
Can I just make the statement that, just a reminder, the bids are due on May 10th? So.
Okay.
2 days, no problem.
Yes.
So, Mike, what did you say?
I don't want to say anything inappropriate, but just if the meeting's on May 8th, the bids are actually due on May 10th.
Again, we're talking about the RFP as a whole now. I think we're just talking about the agenda and perhaps the chair.
But I guess I would throw back that part of the motion was to recommend that we stop the RFP process. And as that relates to what we're talking about, if we wait until May, I think maybe we just stick with what we have, go forward with the letter, and then we can discuss other things as needed for recommendation for any committee that can come out of it.
I can write in my letter that we stayed within the agenda items, and this is our request to pull the RFP, and that in the May agenda, we will identify additional concerns regarding the same matter. Does that work?
Yeah.
Well, the board seems to receive that letter.
Well, I guess I can write it this weekend and hand deliver it.
For their next meeting?
When do they meet next? This Tuesday? There you have it.
Too late to get on their agenda, though.
So much for Jody being so
Be on the agenda. Their agenda comes out today.
Yeah.
2 days in a row, my chick. Okay, so we have announcements. Any member of the committee may make announcements or comments. The EMCC may not discuss or take action on any item raised during announcements, except to decide whether to place the matter on subsequent agendas, and we have. Anything else besides the agenda item that we just proposed?
Point to get it on their agenda so that it could be discussed. What would that deadline be to get it on their agenda? Perhaps it's today?
I don't know that.
Can you check into it, because it may be today, it may have been yesterday.
It was today at noon.
It was today at noon.
Yeah.
Have we gotten to noon yet? It's only 11:13. I can write a letter.
Thank you. Just a point.
Might as well get it done.
Mike's point.
It may or may not.
Okay, we're going to keep going. Any other announcements?
Get writing.
Next meeting, next regular scheduled EMCC meeting will be held Wednesday, May 8th at 10:30 in the Cinnamon Room. We're adjourned.